Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we've got a great show for you today. We've got Fred Katz, senior NBA writer at The Athletic and the host of the Katz and Shoot podcast. We get into it all with the Knicks. James Dolan's interview with WFAN, Knicks defensive struggles, some injury updates, Karl-Anthony Towns, looking ahead to some potential extensions with Miles McBride, Mitchell Robinson, and a bunch more. So dig into this episode. Fred Katz was fantastic with us. Welcome to the Putback here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we have a fantastic guest with us today, Fred Katz, senior NBA writer, The Athletic, covered the Knicks for a good amount of time daily. Now he spends time around the team, but he bounces around the league. You can catch a weekly column from him, and The Athletic does a great job providing insight all over the place, Fred. But we are going to focus on the Knicks for the next half hour or so. And as always, we start with the baseline. And the baseline today is the Knicks getting destroyed in Detroit. The defense was once again really bad, Fred. And I want to get right into it with you. You're watching this team. You're seeing them pretty much night in and night out. What has happened here with the defense?
You know, what stands out to me the most is the point of attack defense. To be honest, it's their inability to consistently stop the ball, and I think what we're seeing happen is teams are just getting into the paint. And I was on another podcast yesterday, and I said this on another podcast, and I'll say it again, because it's a really jarring statistic, which is normally when teams scheme stuff out, when they come up with how they're going to build their defense, they're like, okay, we're going to take away either the paint first or we're going to take away threes first. And normally you have to pick one or the other. Almost nobody takes away both. The Knicks schematically try to take away the paint. That's what they want to do. But in practice, what's happening is they haven't been taking away either so far this season. They're one of only two teams in the league, or one of only two defenses in the league, who are bottom 10 in three-point frequency allowed and dunk and layup frequency allowed. The only other team is the New Orleans Pelicans, who are, obviously at the bottom of the standings in the Western Conference. That's not a class you want to be in. That's not really a stat you want to be at. It means they're giving up too many shots at the rim. A lot of those threes they're giving up are after the ball already hits the paint, and then the ball's getting kicked out, and we're seeing swings and open catch and shoots, which is why the percentage from three against them is so high. It's been an issue, and I think they need to figure out a way to stop the ball at the point of attack, which obviously is a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, I think it's probably the toughest thing to do in the NBA defensively. So the Knicks aren't the only team struggling with it, but it's been glaring for New York, especially in this 4-game losing streak here. They've trailed by at least 19 in the second half of 3 of those 4 losses, and it's just been a sloth. And I think one of my, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it isn't, one of my takes is I think Mikal Bridges is best suited off the ball, where he can create havoc in the passing lane, where he can come in and help if needed. And as a point of attack defender, sure, he's wide and he's got the quickness and the defensive acumen to play that position. But I think sometimes just quicker guards he'll have a tough time with, and or the Knick pick and roll defense, whether it's schematic or execution, just puts everybody in a difficult spot. And it's what creates the pain points, Fred, that you're talking about, the open threes that you're talking about. It's funny, the opposing offense is playing like Mike Brown would like to see his offense play, and we've seen that offense play at times this season. And I got a question from Joseph Zakola, one of the audience members. Thanks, Joseph. He says, hey, Ian, hey, Fred, 3 quarters through the Spurs game, the Knicks looked like a juggernaut. 13 quarters later, they don't look like they could beat a G League team. I know the D has been bad for a couple weeks, but what happened? How have they forgotten what worked so quickly? So I think that's a pretty good big picture question, because that seems to be the line of demarcation, Fred, that NBA Cup Spurs game. What's your theory about the backslide since then?
I don't know. It could be a number of things, to be honest. I mean, it could just be that this is the dog days of the season. The Thunder are 6-6 in their last 12 games and just got demolished by the Charlotte Hornets. This happens to the best of teams, and I'm sure there's an element of that to this. I think there's an element of the schedule probably affecting them. They had that, both physically and emotionally exhausting run with the Cup, and they've been on the road so much lately after they played a lot of home games early, which stacked up wins early for them when they were, they lost one out of their first, 13, 14 at home, and that was a big thing for them. And these road games and this road slate is tough. And then I think the other part of it, too, is they've kind of gotten out of rhythm. You mentioned Mikal Bridges. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I agree with you. I think it's always been the case for Bridges. He's an excellent off-ball defender. When he's on the ball, he can, maybe struggle with a smaller, quicker guard, or he just won't look as good. I thought earlier in the season he was a little more ferocious guarding the top ends of pick and rolls with the way that he approached screens, a little more physical, that kind of stuff. And I've seen him get away from that to a degree. And I was having this conversation with somebody in the league. And this is why you have those conversations, because that person reminded me, says, did he regress? Did he get worse? Or is it just kind of impossible to maintain that level of physicality every single night when you're kind of one of the only ones playing to that level on the defensive side of the ball? Like, it's really a lot to put on the shoulders of Bridges and OG Anunoby, especially when Mitchell Robinson is so in and out of the lineup. When he's in the lineup, he doesn't play a lot of minutes. And we've seen him take better care of his body when he's out there. Like, we don't see him making those crazy reckless plays on the defensive side of the floor, which I'm sure nobody wants, but it also means that he hasn't necessarily been at the defensive level he was, say, during last year's playoff run when he was really guarding at an all defense level. I don't think Mitchell Robinson's been bad by any stretch of the imagination defensively. I just don't think he's been at like the best version of Mitchell Robinson that we've seen. And when that kind of stuff starts to dip a little bit, all of a sudden, like when the house is made of cards and the foundation, shakes a little bit, then, the cards fall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's the question, right, Fred? Is this signs of a foundation that is shaky, and is it telling people who watch this team that this is where it's going to ultimately end defensively? They're not going to be able to play at a high enough level to win, to go where they want to go? Or is it one of those just blips on the schedule, portions of the schedule where every NBA team hits it? An interesting quote from Sam Presti, who you covered in OKC. It's been flying around. I think he said it in 2023. He said, the sky falls on an NBA team at least 2 times a year. You may play horrible for weeks or maybe a month, and you don't want to have several months, but the teams that have the sophisticated competitiveness to them, that while you're going through that, they understand that that's the solution, is to keep pounding and to keep working. And the Knicks have shown that attitude really with Jalen Brunson, and it was instilled by Tom Thibodeau. And I would assume this group has that same attitude. So I'm more inclined to say, look, this is just a stretch here where they're struggling. Every NBA team goes through it. And maybe I'm being naive here, but I've watched Jalen Brunson play enough basketball, especially here in New York, to be comfortable saying that this is probably a blip on the radar. But what do you see? Is it a crack in the foundation? Is it something, a big picture that fans should be worried about? Is it just a blip? If you had to guess, which way were you going on that?
I think how worried you are should depend on what your expectations are for this team, however you define a successful season to be. If you define anything short of winning a title to be an unsuccessful season, then yeah, of course you should be worried, because the Western Conference is just loaded with really good teams. They got the doors blown off them by the Pistons. And I want to say, like, first and foremost, the Pistons were so impressive in that game on Monday. That team is unbelievably competitive. I'm working on a story on the Pistons, which will be out in the next week or two, and I just spent a bunch of time with them. It's just a group of ridiculously competitive people, and they wanted this game. They were really hungry after the playoff series last year. I think they're very hungry to prove that they're not just a plucky young team, and they wanted to show that to the Knicks. This meant something to them, and it looked like it meant something to them. And that's a good thing if you're the Pistons. That's what you want. It didn't look like it meant something to the Knicks, and that's really not what you necessarily want. It also could just be that time in the year. I mean, last year we were all panicked, and I wasn't necessarily absolved of this. We were all panicked over them not beating Cleveland and not beating Boston during the regular season. And then all of a sudden they come out and they beat Boston 4 out of 6 times in the playoffs. Things can turn around, and this doesn't necessarily have to have grand meaning, but there are certainly, like, look, if you're going to play with Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns on the court at the same time together in your most important moments, teams are going to attack that. You mentioned that Spurs game that they played, not the cup game that they won, but the regular season game that they lost after the fact. And part of the reason the Spurs made that comeback is because in the fourth quarter, they were like, what are we going to do? The Spurs have a ton of really athletic, young, spry guards who are good at pick and rolls. And they said, we are going to bring Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson into every single action that we possibly can. And we're just going to attack those 2 weak points. And the team that ends up winning at the highest levels, not winning 50 games, but the highest levels, winning titles, those are the teams that aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the teams that are the least flawed. And when you have some warts, they get exacerbated in playoff series and against excellent teams. And that's something that should be a concern with this group, because the Knicks have flaws. But the East is also, like, not in a very good place right now. And I still think this is the conference that the Knicks are going to win the conference. Like, this is the year to do it. This is when you have to do it. This is when they have the vets, the experience, the talents, all the above.
Yeah, this is the window. And you started, Fred, talking about expectations and however you as an individual define them, how I define them, Fred, how you define them matters, but not a lot. The thing that matters is how does James Dolan define
I can see them. Where you're going.
Yes, and James Dolan on an interview on WFAN, Craig Carton's new show with Chris McMonagle, Dolan, talking with those guys, hit on a number of different topics. A number of them stood out to me, maybe just because we don't hear from James Dolan often at all. So anytime he speaks, it feels significant. But when he talked about expectations, he did not shy away from the obvious expectation when you come off of a season where you go to the Eastern Conference finals for the first time in 25 years and you fire your coach. The logical conclusion is you think you can do better with another coach. James Dolan, I like the candor here, because he could have said, well, we want to see how the year goes. Well, we want to, just get better every day. Let's see where we are in come playoff time. He didn't shy away from it. He said, look, we should go to the finals and we should win the finals, but we have to go to the finals. And for him to put that out there publicly, it kind of confirms everything that, Fred, I'm sure you and I were thinking about where the bar is for this team. So doesn't really matter what I think. Doesn't really matter what you think. It's really what the owner thinks. And when the bar is that high, things are expected and demands are put in place. And so this is a high pressure situation for this team. And I don't think that what we're seeing is I think you hit it on the head, Fred. Maybe some of these issues we're seeing come back to the surface during the postseason where you're playing a tough team. So it's not nothing, but I think the team's good enough to right the ship, so to speak, in the regular season. But everybody knows, everyone there knows internally. Now everybody who listened to that interview knows the expectations are certainly NBA Finals and NBA Championship. And so what did you take away from the WFAN interview, Fred, if you heard it?
I felt like I was listening to George Steinbrenner when I heard that. It was
you did make a Reggie Jackson reference.
It was very Steinbrenner. That was like a comment that Steinbrenner would have made when I was watching the Yankees in the 90s growing up, and then they did it. I wasn't necessarily surprised by that comment, because it was completely in line with the organization's actions, in line with everything that I heard, and I'm sure that you heard, and I'm sure that, all the other reporters around the team had heard for a while. And it was in line with the statement the organization put out from Leon Rose after they fired Thibodeau. They put out this short statement after they fired Tibbs over the summer, and they said they were, quote, singularly focused on winning a championship. And they said they felt like they had to make this move because of that. That, you don't have to read between the lines to understand why they did that. I thought his comments on Thibodeau, said the quiet part of that statement out loud. Dolan's comments about Thibodeau when he was on WFAN yesterday, just talking about how they wanted somebody who could be a collaborator and that kind of stuff. Again, stuff that we all reported and heard about over the coaching search. And then, after they hired Mike Brown as well, and stuff that people in the organization have talked about a lot. I thought it was a lot of stuff that, like, we had all thought of, we had all thought about, we had all surmised, but it was good to actually hear somebody from, a decision maker with the Knicks say it on the record, because it's not just Dolan that we don't get to hear, right? I mean, I know fans are probably sick of media talking about it, but we don't get to hear Leon Rose, we don't get to hear William Wesley, we don't get to hear the rest of the front office kind of put their names on stuff. So it's good to hear when somebody from the organization comes out and puts a statement on goals and objectives and strategy and reasoning for decisions and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me,
wish we heard it more.
Yeah, I try not to get so caught up in that stuff publicly, because I know fans don't care, but to not come out and talk after you fire your head coach, to not explain that decision, I just think that's poor practice. And I understand no one's going to make Leon Rose talk to the media, and this is kind of the policy that they're taking, and that's their prerogative. But I think you make a major decision, somebody should talk about it. So the idea that it's happening several months later, I don't think is the way to do it. But the idea that you at least heard from a principal and then organization, a decision maker, about the decision, I thought it was interesting. And so the two things, though, that I think may get glossed over is Jim Dolan talking about this was built on Tom Thibodeau's shoulders. I mean, I thought he gave Thibodeau a lot of credit, and he said, if I was owning a team that was starting from scratch, it would be a gold mine to get Tom Thibodeau. So it almost, he brought you through the rationale in a way that, yeah, we had all talked about, we had all written, but just to hear it publicly, it just presents it in a different light. The Yankee George Steinbrenner comparison too is interesting, because he actually was talking about how he's been an owner for 30 years, and his purview now, the way he looks through things, is there a plan in place? Is the plan being followed? He said they'll get impatient when the plan is not being followed, and things kind of go haywire. And when he gets impatient, changes are made. But it seems like he has kind of changed the way he's looked at this process over his time as an owner. And he talked about, ownership not being an achievement, building something, being a part of building something is what an achievement is. And he wants to do that, obviously, here with the Knicks and the Rangers. Look, 2 decades of dysfunction and a lot of losses in Jim Dolan's first 2 decades as owner. A lot of controversy, a lot of negativity around the organization. It's been different with Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau, but they made a huge decision with Thibodeau. Is it going to work? Was it the right call? We're going to find out in June, but it's just fascinating to hear the rationale there. And I thought Craig Carton and Chris McMonagle did a really good job in getting that out of the owner. Any other takeaways, Fred, from what you heard from that interview?
Yeah, I mean, look, the coaching conversation is going to be a topic all year. There is literally nothing Mike Brown can do to escape it. He could be the best coach in the league by any measure that you believe you should measure best coach in the league. And there's nothing that he can do to escape it until June. And I think that's just the reality. And as any basketball fan knows, it's different than a lot of other sports. The NBA playoffs, the game becomes, I think, more of a different game than it does in football or in baseball. Obviously, every playoff system has its own quirks, but it's a different sport for the NBA in the postseason. And it's especially a different sport to coach. And there are some coaches who do an unbelievable job in the regular season, and you mess up in one playoff series, and all of a sudden it's a referendum on the entire job you did for the whole season. There are some coaches who mess around for a whole regular season, maybe have a bad regular season, maybe underperform, maybe play bad lineups, and all of a sudden they discover something. I remember I covered the Thunder in 2015-16. It was Billy Donovan's first season as an NBA head coach. He had been a really successful college coach for a long time, but was still a rookie in the NBA. And he was learning throughout the course of the regular season, and Billy Donovan was very criticized throughout the course of that regular season. And the Thunder were looked at as like, darn, is this team going to be disappointing? They had a really awful March, and they went into the playoffs, and all of a sudden Billy Donovan started tweaking with lineups and strategies, and he found this one really big lineup that really bothered the Spurs in the second round. They upset the 67-win Spurs in the second round. Then he finds these really interesting lineups and starts playing these really interesting defensive schemes against the Warriors, takes a 3-1 lead on the Warriors. They eventually blew that series very famously, obviously, before the 73-win Warriors lost to the Cavaliers in the finals. But the narrative on Billy Donovan totally changed during that time. It was, wow, look at this guy being so adaptable in the playoffs. He went from a guy who, did he have a good first season, to, oh, this guy's got real potential as a coach. And now look at Billy Donovan. He's just kind of universally agreed in the industry is like, that guy's just a very good, very adaptable, very smart, measured coach. And ultimately with Mike Brown, with these expectations, the reason they got rid of Tom Thibodeau wasn't to win regular season games. It wasn't to beat the Pistons in January. It was to figure it out during a playoff series. And Mike Brown is going to, what is it? Earn your yard. Is that the expression? He's going to earn his yard. If that's not the expression, I'm making it up. He's going to earn his yard.
Keep. I've heard guard your yard.
Earn your keep, guard your yard. There you go. Guard your yard, maybe? I don't know. Earn your keep. It's something. Mike Brown his value is going to be whatever he does in a playoff series, which is something we don't know. We don't know right now if there are some things he's holding back because it's the regular season. We don't know what adjustment he's going to make in game 2 or game 4 or game 6 against the Pistons or the Cavs or the Celtics or the Magic or whomever else. We don't know what he's going to do in those scenarios. And that is ultimately what's going to define Mike Brown's season, no matter what.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. There is no escaping it. One other thing from the FAN interview on the Craig Carton show was Jim Dolan saying he didn't think there's going to be any big trades. He likes this group. He thinks, and he said we, meaning the Knicks, believe that this group can win a championship. I, as a cynic, I take that with a grain of salt, because if he says anything else, that's going to create some chaos in the locker room. It's going to be unsettling to some players in the locker room and the group. So it's what you would say in that setting, but for him to say it as emphatically as he did, I don't think the Knicks are going to sit on their hands ahead of the trade deadline, and certainly just projecting ahead, if they continue to struggle defensively like this and the record isn't where they want it to be close to February, I think they would do something significant. But as Dolan said, right now, they like the group. I think right now was the key phrase there. And, we talk about Knicks' interest in different players and what they might do. But I think, a lot of it depends on what the team is doing in those 3 weeks leading up to the deadline. So I just took that with a grain of salt a bit. And I had a question from No Frenemies Allowed. He was asking about the trade statement too. And he was also referencing Dolan saying that, Leon can overrule me, but I don't see any trades being made. And what did you make of that, just that piece of the interview?
Which part? The not seeing trades being made, said, or Leon can overrule me?
Yeah, Leon can overrule me. Yeah, that piece.
I take that with a grain of salt too. I think that's a thing that, like, I'm sure there are certain topics that Leon Rose can voice his opinion on, and Dolan can say, okay, I trust you. I'm sure if they find a trade, and I'm just saying a name, they find a trade where they're sending out Guerschon Yabusele and they're bringing in a guy who makes a similar salary, who can be a ninth man for them. And Leon says, trust me, this is a good one. I'm sure Dolan will trust Leon on that situation. With the bigger stuff, no, I don't think Leon Rose can overrule him. And I don't say that as a criticism of anybody in the organization. I don't think that's really the case in any organization in the league, save for maybe a few. I think Sam Presti, save for something that's just financially not viable, I think Sam Presti could probably overrule Clay Bennett in Miami. I think Pat Riley in certain situations, yes, I think Pat Riley in Miami could maybe do it with Mickey Arison in certain situations. But we're talking about ridiculously established championship winning executives there. RC Buford with Peter Holt in San Antonio. I think there are probably some scenarios, but RC is not nearly as involved on the basketball side now as he was 10, 15 years ago. And it's Brian Wright pulling a lot of strings there in San Antonio. So I didn't take that much out of that statement especially when, this is Dolan's organization. We all know he's an opinionated human being. Um, not letting your GM overrule you doesn't mean you're meddling. It just means you're the final decision maker. And I think he is on the major things. He is the final decision maker. Always has been. He's always going to be. And I think that's just the way it's going to go. I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it because you're somebody who just knows the organization so well. I'd like to know if you disagree.
So I I would say this in a global sense when Phil Jackson took over and Dolan said in the press conference said, I don't know enough about basketball to be involved in the way I've been involved in the past. This is Phil's show. He can do what he wants to do. And his whole thing during Phil Jackson's tenure, when he was asked about the Knicks, was ask Phil. I think his kids even made T-shirts that said "Ask Phil," something like that. So I bring that up to say I think there was a shift there where day-to-day basketball decisions. Sure, he cared. Sure, I'm sure he wanted to be in the loop, but he's not gonna, use his influence the way he did in that Carmelo Anthony trade and things like that, and previous iterations of those Knicks teams. And so I think that basically remained the case, remained his approach. Does he get involved? Yes. Does he hold everyone to a high standard? Yes. And does he want to know about process and how it's working? Yes. Um, that's the case. That was the case back then. That's the case now. But I think the difference is, again, not going to heavily weigh in on the day-to-day decision. I think that, yeah, maybe I'm cynical, but I think that you look at the Thibodeau decision. Obviously, James Dolan had a lot of say in that. I do think Leon Rose, if he didn't want it to happen, he could have walked away. So obviously Leon Rose was on board too. But those big decisions, sure. But I do think there's a difference here with the trades and the signings and things like that. He's not involved to the level where he was pre-Phil Jackson. All right, let's leave it there with the FAN interview. I will say this: if James Dolan's doing a press tour, why not hit Katz and shoot Freddie Katz? Why not come on a putback? Let's there's room for you here, Jim, if you want to start talking.
I would love it.
So I should say Fred Katz, a great podcast, Katz and Shoot. You got to check that out. He does a great job there. I'm hoping to be on sometime soon if he'll allow me. But let's get
love it.
Basketball here because Karl-Anthony Towns struggling of late. The numbers have been surprising in the last handful of games here. What are you seeing from Karl?
Can we talk about that Pistons game for a second?
Sure.
I don't want to. Okay, I don't want to pin the whole Pistons game on Karl-Anthony Towns because obviously there were a million issues with that Pistons game. A million of them. And OG Anunoby massively struggled in that game. Mikal Bridges struggled in that game. Jalen Brunson didn't have an assist in that game. Massively struggled. I mean, if you're going to watch a guy score 25 and massively struggle, that's the game. So it was not just Karl-Anthony Towns. However, what stood out to me so much, and for what it's worth, we talk about, the team falling off of late and the defense and whatever else, like they've had some injuries, but OG Anunoby has kind of sneakily, his shot has kind of fallen off of late, and he has not been able to make a three for a while. He had one or two good games thrown in there, but a few weeks now, Anunoby has just been really struggling from three. And, I think Bridges' shooting numbers are a little bit down from the unbelievably hot shooting start that he was off to at the start of the season too. So that's worth noting too. With Towns, I was just watching him extra close yesterday because of the way the Pistons guarded him during the playoffs last year. They were the team that they threw Tobias Harris on him. They were like, Duran is going to guard Josh Hart, and you're just going to get into Towns. You're going to get crazy physical with Towns. And every once in a while, Duran would guard Towns, and he did an okay job. Duran's a much better defender now than he was last year. He did an okay job. But the Pistons' entire philosophy on Towns was, let's get as physical as we can possibly get with him. Now, Isaiah Stewart is maybe the most underrated defensive player in the NBA. He's the best defender off the bench in the league. He is in the tier one of best rim protectors. He's unmovable. He's incredibly strong. He's ferocious. He is as physical as they come. And he's got quick feet and good in the perimeter. I mean, he's just an insanely great defender. Isaiah Stewart had moments on Towns where I thought he made him look really uncomfortable. The Pistons' entire philosophy is just beat the heck out of Karl-Anthony Towns and kind of frustrate him so that either he folds or he starts hitting back, and then all of a sudden you get the offensive fouls. And that's something that has been a struggle for Towns for his entire career. And I think has been probably a little advanced even from normal this year with the offensive fouls. He had 3 of them in the game against the Pistons. And when that starts happening, he's out of rhythm. And all of a sudden, he doesn't look like the dominant All-NBA big man that he is. And I think that was kind of what we saw yesterday. On top of the fact that, like, give the Pistons credit. Like, that defense is amazing. That's the number 2 ranked defense in the league. They're ferocious. They're fast. They play on amazing help principles. Asar Thompson is a great defender. They have a lot of great individual defenders there, and they play ridiculously hard. I mean, they kind of have like what the Knicks used to be, like that 23-24 team. They kind of have those vibes in terms of their competitiveness and the way that they fight and the way that they guard. It's really impressive for a young team.
And they come at you in waves. Javonte Green, St. John's, Dennis Jenkins, just really strong players, capable players who impact winning for them. And so the depth is impressive too, especially for a team that lost the best shooter in the NBA in Malik Beasley in the offseason. And so, yeah, you credit Trajan Langdon, you credit JB Bickerstaff. I think also, if you're looking at these players, some of the players, I don't know, a lot maybe is overstating it. I'm not sure. But these players were brought in by Troy Weaver. So you give credit to him for drafting the way he did, bring those players in. But it's all come together really, really well for Detroit. And they are going to be there as a hurdle to these Knicks at some point in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how the teams kind of go from here. You talked about Jalen Brunson's game. Did you see, like, maybe there's a middle ground here? Because I think that for Jalen Brunson to have 0 assists, 6 turnovers, obviously that's bad. But there's another side of the spectrum where his teammates could not score and it was not effective. So maybe did he say to himself, we need points. I need to try to get us going. I don't know what his mindset was in particular in that game, but how did you assess that one from Brunson?
You know, it's been a thing lately for me that I've noticed. Brunson's taking longer to bring up the ball than, I don't know if the numbers back up what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to release the take anyway because I'm okay with being wrong sometimes because I'm secure in who I am as a human being.
I love it.
I think he's taking longer to bring up the ball too often. And Mike Brown emphasizes pace all the time. And when he does, he's not just talking about fast breaks and that kind of stuff. He's talking about getting into their actions quickly. And I'd bet you, if you look at the advanced numbers and you check over these last few weeks where the Knicks are in terms of getting into their offense, I'd bet you when Brunson brings the ball up, they are slower now than they were during that stretch when that offense looked totally unstoppable for a really nice portion of the season. And it hasn't been that long. I mean, it's a 4-game losing streak that's been about a week, and they weren't playing great ball before that. They barely squeaked by New Orleans. They barely squeaked by Atlanta. At the time of those games, I thought, you know what? This is like what good teams do. They didn't play well on this night, and Jalen Brunson saved them in crunch time. Now you look at it a little bit differently. It's like they haven't played a complete game in a while. They haven't played a complete game really maybe since that Cup final against San Antonio. And I think a large part of it is the offense is at its best when they can like run a pick and roll with 18, 19 on the shot clock. When they're not running their first action until 15 on the shot clock, Seth Partnow, who has worked in the analytics department for the Milwaukee Bucks and has been in the media for a long time as well, fantastic analytics writer, did a study years ago that basically explained that for every second that ticks off the shot clock, that's 1 point off of your expected offensive efficiency. Offensive efficiency is points per 100 possessions. And so if you're getting into your offense with 19 on the shot clock, you're going to be about 4 points per 100 possessions better in expected offensive efficiency than if you get into it with 15 on the shot clock. And if you're waiting till 13, 14, like that's a large difference. 4 or 5 points per 100 possessions might not sound like a huge difference, but that's the difference between being like the fifth offense and being the 15th or the 18th offense. Like that's a real difference there. And it's one of the reasons why Mike Brown wanted them to speed this thing along and wanted to emphasize getting into sets quicker. And it's something that I've noticed of late. And it's something, I don't know how you fix it. I mean, I think it's like when I ask players, like, when they have an issue with transition defense, I ask them, how do you get better at this? And they just say to me, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. And like, I think with this, like, you just got to do it.
And I wonder, is that where you're seeing some fatigue? Is that where, to me, there's a number of areas where you're missing Josh Hart? Are you missing Josh Hart there because as maybe he can run in the backcourt and get a pass from Jalen Brunson and get the ball up quicker? I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that the Josh Hart absence is a factor here. I don't think he cures all that ails the Knicks, but they certainly miss him. They fell, I believe, to 2-5, Fred, without Josh since he sprained his ankle. And obviously they were on a great run with him in the starting lineup. I do think that, the Knicks had said, I think last Friday, that he was going to be reevaluated in a week, meaning this coming Friday. But I think his return, I think it's possible he gets back before that. I think that he's close. He's close to coming back here, and they really need him. They have the Clippers on Wednesday, and I just, based on how things have gone, I wouldn't rule that out, the idea that he's back then. And then Landry Shamet also close. Shamet's a guy that played a big role for them, and I think should be back, if not within the week, soon thereafter. And so you're going to get whole again here if you're the Knicks, and maybe that's where the difference is. Miles McBride coming back from that ankle, and you've been on top of, at least on Twitter, just the idea that his shooting is out of control. I mean, it's just it's like he never misses at this point. And so we're going to have, I think, Jawan Staten, hopefully Miles McBride's trainer, shooting coach, on at some point soon. We're going to talk to him about that. But Fred, your thoughts on McBride, and then I'll get into a bigger picture topic there.
My goodness. Honestly, this run is ridiculous. He's shooting over his last 10, 11 games. He's shooting over 50% from three. It really feels like he has taken some shots. He's not taking easy shots too. There are a lot of catch and shoot shots, but he takes them when a defender is like right in his face. He takes them in transition. He took a three a couple of games ago where he got a steal, went one dribble. He was going full speed, and he just stopped at the 3-point line. I think people have to realize it looked like nothing. I think people have to realize how unbelievably difficult it is to go from full speed when you're already past half court to fully stop before the 3-point arc, and then to shoot a three on balance, it to go in, and for it not to be one of those no, yes shots, for it to be actually like, yeah, great shot. You should totally take that shot every time you can take that shot, because he is just so unbelievably accurate. Stephen Bondy from the New York Post wrote a really great story, I think it was last week, about how McBride had a conversation with Ray Allen earlier in his career, and Ray Allen talked to him about how, at his size, just having a higher release point was going to be so huge for him. So he started jumping way more on his jump shot. And Bondy went and looked at, early in his career, like his rookie year, he wasn't jumping nearly as much on his jump shot. And now he jumps crazy high on his jump shot. He has this really high release. It's allowing him to be able to shoot over basically anybody, shoot these incredibly contested threes. And on top of that, for what it's worth, we talked about their point of attack defense against smaller guards and facilitators and that kind of stuff. I mean, McBride is maybe their best guy on the team at that. The on-off data on him is ridiculous. I think sometimes there's a lot of noise in those sorts of numbers, but every single year, they are just so much better. It's every year. They're so much better when Deuce McBride is on the court compared to when he's on the bench. They're like almost 14 points per 100 possessions better right now when McBride is on the court. It makes perfect sense. He has been a fantastic complimentary player. And, he's eligible for an extension this summer, Ian. It's going to be a very interesting extension situation. a very interesting extension situation because of the Knicks cap situation, on top of the fact that he is going to be justified in going in and asking for a ton of money because
Yeah.
he's just become this really, really good player.
Yeah, it's a perfect timing for him. And just as a human being spending time around him, I'm happy for him that it's gone this way because just my interactions with him, a great, great guy. And he deserves what's coming to him, which is a big payday. And I'm glad you mentioned that because we had a question from Camille Khan, Fred, who was talking about McBride and Mitchell Robinson and those guys not having extensions yet. Mitch Robinson being eligible for one. And he's wanting to know, like, what are they going to command on their next deal? And will the Knicks get there in terms of numbers? And I don't know. I don't have insight in terms of what they're going to be asking for. Obviously, it's going to be a significant raise for McBride. Mitch Robinson's going to be looking for a raise too. But where the Knicks are, second apron, I mean, is there a world where you do both? I just don't know if there is a world for the Knicks where you do both, and so that you have to choose one or the other. It's a fascinating question for me, big picture for this team. It's not a now question, but it's certainly something that is looming in the future.
Yeah, I would love to be able to answer that question, and it's not that I can't answer it because I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone knows the answer because we haven't seen the results yet. I don't think Mitchell Robinson is just going to up and extend in like a month or anything like that.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's happening. Maybe he signs an extension, what's technically an extension after the season and before he hits free agency or something like that.
Right.
But I don't think he's just going to, up and sign an extension. And for McBride, look, the reason it's hard to figure out what the Knicks cap future is right now is because it's going to be super results dependent. If the Knicks disappoint in the first round of the playoffs, which I'm not predicting they will, I'm just giving an extreme example. If the Knicks disappoint in the first round of the playoffs, they're going to handle the roster construction of this team moving forward very differently than if the Knicks win the finals. Because James Dolan has shown that he will pay. But James Dolan also went on the radio and said, not, I hope this team wins the finals, or I think maybe in a great situation, if everything goes right, we could win the finals, or I'm wishing for the best for this team and I love the group. He said that he thinks they should win the finals. And he talked about raising banners at MSG. And significant changes are going to come if they fall, especially well short of that. I don't know what significant changes means yet. That could mean significant changes to the roster. It could mean significant changes elsewhere, but there will be some sort of significant change. And if they fall well short, I seriously doubt they're going to go into the second apron just to keep this group together. Fall a little short, maybe. If they win a title, maybe they say, we got to keep this group together. The one thing I will say regarding McBride is the Knicks have been historically, they've really preferred to ink their guys to long-term extensions. That is a strategy they've really wanted. It hasn't happened with literally every guy, but generally they try to sign a guy to an extension. And then if they're unable to reach terms, all of a sudden that guy is either out or maybe on the way out, or at least possibly on the block with an uncertain future. That's what happened with Julius Randle. Julius Randle became extension eligible. Two sides were so far apart that there wasn't even really a negotiation. And then Julius Randle is out. That's what happened with Emmanuel Quickley after his extension. Obi Toppin, it was kind of more front-ended. He was going to be eligible for an extension. Both sides knew there wasn't going to be any sort of realistic talk about an extension, so they trade Obi Toppin at the time that they did. They tend to try to be Quentin Grimes, 100%, same thing. Yeah. They try to be really proactive about that kind of stuff, but they like signing their guys to extensions. Even Josh Hart, they got to opt into a deal so they could extend him. Bridges extends, Brunson extends. They like doing these extensions. So I think there will be best faith efforts to get something done with McBride, but whatever the numbers are and that kind of stuff, it's all going to depend on, how the Knicks do. And McBride is also capped because of his current salary. McBride is going to be capped at it's like 4 for 90 something on what he could make. It depends on what the league revenue is for this year and a million other cap things that nobody wants to hear about. And then they'll get they'll do the estimated average player salary 2 years from now. And I'm not even kidding. That's what it is. And then they'll do it off of that number. And so it's, we can't even know exactly what it is, but McBride is capped at that number. But maybe if he keeps playing like this, he's going to be justified in asking for a large percentage of that number.
Yeah.
Because that's what players who are good players get paid now.
We were talking about WFAN. Do you remember when Mike Francesa fell asleep or appeared to fall asleep when Sweeney Murdy was giving a report?
Yes.
I was going to joke around and do that when you were talking cap numbers, but I didn't have the heart. And I appreciate the insight. So thank you. And yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Big picture sense there for sure. Quick all-star voting update is Jalen Brunson, the number 2 in the East in the second round of FAN all-star vote, according to the NBA. You have Karl-Anthony Towns, number 7. You have OG Anunoby, 13. You have Josh Hart, 16. Mikal Bridges, 15. So again, you've got all 5 starters there in the top, 20 of voting in the East. And so that's kind of where it sits. The Josh Hart case gets more and more interesting to me with either his absence or his play on the court. Again, he's not going to cure everything that ails this team, but I think him being back on the floor healthy, which again, return is imminent. I think it'll change some things. It'll change what you're seeing from the group. Let's go, Fred, now to a little bit around the league quickly. Shams Charania reporting Trae Young and the Hawks are working towards a divorce, working towards parting ways. I think just based on especially how Atlanta played without Trae Young in this recent stretch this year, the writing was on the wall. It was just a matter of when and how they were going to separate. And so appears it's going to happen ahead of the deadline. Who do you have there as your most likely destinations?
Oh, well, I know Mark Stein reported Washington. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm also not 100% convinced that there's actually going to be a trade because the reality is that Atlanta is not going to want to take significant money back. They're just not in that place right now. And Trae Young is on a deal that he could be a free agent after this year. And I could see them getting to a place where it's like, well, Atlanta wants stuff back for Trae, but another team wants stuff back for doing a favor for taking on Trae. There are a lot of guards out there, really players out there who are kind of in the Trae Young archetype right now. And I don't even mean like the on-court style, but just the guy who is really good on one way of the court, who isn't as good on the other way of the court, who makes an expensive contract and who's available, or the guy who has some sort of, very obvious flaw who's available. Anthony Davis is awesome on both ends of the court, but he's got the health history. Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, Ja Morant, Zion Williamson with the health history. There are a lot of these guys who are out there. And I don't know about you. I haven't heard any real traction, like actual traction on any of these guys. I just haven't heard any of it. I think teams are very wary of trading for large salaries in the second apron era. And I think teams are very wary of trading something for Trae Young when he could up and leave this summer. And Trae Young specifically is like a very particular fit inside of your team, as we've seen with the Hawks this year and in other years, where he can be like he was in 2021, excel and help carry you to the conference finals. And he can also kind of be the backbreaking part of your defense and, maybe command the ball too much on the offensive side, which can ruin the offensive rhythm. He's a very particular fit, and he's a difficult mid-season ad. You want a training camp with Trae Young, you want a training camp with that kind of guy. If you have to build stuff around him, you don't want to just add him to the mix. He's not like OG Anunoby, where he's just like fit him in with anybody, and he's the same guy going to play the same way and be good to go. So I don't know. I'm sure I know Shams's report was 100% correct. I don't know if it's actually going to happen. It might. I could just see it not happening. My intuitions keep saying to me that it might not.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky deal to make. I keep an eye on Minnesota just because they were very aggressive on KD. It seems like they're not scared to take. KD is obviously not Trae Young, but take a swing where there's risk involved, and they're looking at the point guard position and trying to figure that out. I look there. I look also. It's a strange one, maybe, but Portland. You look at their point guard position. I know they've been kind of fishing around, just doing intel work on bolstering that position. Is that the answer? I don't know. I have no idea. But I think also Miami, just in terms of not being afraid to be in the water for those significant players that could become available. Obviously, Giannis, that's, Miami would be one of the destinations that I think has a good shot there if that ever came to fruition. But I think big name hunting, I think they're always going to be in the mix. But for all the reasons you said, it could end up here with Trae Young still on the Hawks after the trade deadline, and then they figure it out afterwards. But nonetheless, a couple quick Nick things. Nothing really significant. I don't think has changed over the past couple of weeks. I think still open to moving Yabusele. I'd be, I guess, a little bit surprised if that didn't happen, given where things sit with the Knicks and their biggest free agent signing of the offseason. And then, what are you looking to get back? Are you trying to get a backup point guard? Are you looking for a wing? I think that in part will be based on how they're playing. Again, the 3 weeks leading up to the deadline. There's an appetite for a backup point guard. Not much has changed, though, at least from what I am hearing. Fred, how about you? You hear anything league-wide or Knicks specific that is of interest?
Yeah, same place. I think they've looked at a backup point guard. I think they've looked at a backup wing. I know they've kind of called around and checked in just to see the market on bigs also, if they're going to be trading Yabusele. They have definitely called around and tried to gauge the market on Yabusele. The problem is that Yabusele has a player option for next year, and there have been a lot of teams who have looked at that player option and been like, well, we need to take picks back in order to take on this player option for next year that right now is looking very likely that he's going to pick up with the way that he's playing. And teams don't, it's not attractive. So now all of a sudden, in order to get somebody back for Yabusele, you got to include, Knicks have a bunch of second round picks, but they don't really have that many. They don't have real firsts that they can give. The Wizards one that they have is not going to convey. It's going to be 2 seconds, 2 good seconds, but 2 seconds. And they can give a first round swap. But if it's like Yabusele, you got to add, however many second round picks just to get off of the contract. Then you also have to add in second round picks in order to acquire whatever player that you're acquiring. And it becomes a little more difficult. So they could totally trade Yabusele. They're also incredibly close to the hard cap right now, and it would be difficult, not impossible at all, but just a little challenging for them to make like a 2-for-1 trade or something like that, where they're sending out 2, bringing back 1, sending out 3, bringing back 2, because of these other cap eccentricities that are going to make you fall asleep in the middle of your own show. So it's the Yabusele market is it's not booming. If they trade him, it's in order to use his salary to bring in another player, to bring in another salary. That's really what it'll come down to. It's not somebody being like, let's go out and take we think this guy's being misused after being really good for Philly last year. Like I've spoken to a number of teams around the league, and everybody has said the exact same thing to me on it.
Yeah, you hit it on the head with the player option being a complicating factor in any deal. I'll just go back to the offseason. I mean, I know Denver was right there with the Knicks on Guerschon Yabusele in terms of his free agent decision. Obviously, they're dealing with Nikola Jokic being out. Their depth looked very good against Philadelphia last night, so maybe they're sitting pat and they don't look to do anything. I just note that because there was real interest there in the summer. So maybe something ends up happening there. But I do think that things are more than likely to end up with Yabusele elsewhere and the Knicks getting back what they can in that move. We're going to hit quickly, Fred, because you have been very generous with your time. Quick talkback section here. where I'm going to hit on a question from our friend, Dat Franco, who one of my favorite follows on Twitter. He said some very nice things at the beginning of his question. Then he says, with the emergence of Kolek, Diawara, positive play from McCullough Jr., you think the Knicks would shift trade interest from a backup point wing to a power forward, perhaps a Jalen Smith or Saddiq Bey? I don't think Saddiq Bey is gettable with what the Knicks have. I don't think New Orleans would be looking to move him unless there was a major offer. Jalen Smith, obviously a different case. What do you think, Fred? How do you think that takes shape between now and early February?
I think the Knicks are. I think it's possible. I agree with you on Saddiq Bey. I don't think he's gettable with what they have, and if they have to, whatever the Knicks have to give up to get Saddiq Bey, all of a sudden, it's just the case that like it flips to where like, okay, well now that's just way too much to give up for Saddiq Bey. Like they either can't give up enough, or once you like include Deuce McBride, it's like, oh, whoa, slow down here. You're obviously not going to do that. So it flips very quickly. With like a Jalen Smith, I could see them doing something like that. I don't think he necessarily fills a need and fits a priority to that degree. I think ultimately they're going to end up fielding a bunch of offers, or maybe making a bunch of offers is the better way to put it, figuring out what they're going to do with Yabusele's salary and maybe an add-on with somebody else if they have to do it. And then they're going to make whatever trade makes them better right now without having to like totally sacrifice their future. If they can make a trade that's like a bunch of second round picks, Yabusele's salary, and maybe they include one of the young guys or something like that, and they can bring in a guy who makes them better today, I think that's the type of trade that you'll see. And ultimately, I think it's going to come down to like they have other type archetypes on the priority list. You have to remember the goal is not to be like, oh, they're struggling at power forward in the regular season, at backup power forward in the regular season sometimes. The goal is what can put them in the best position to win the title. And if they can bring in a veteran who can help them and be a secondary ball handler whose defense they don't have to worry about, because the reality is like Jordan Clarkson can be a secondary ball handler sometimes, but in the playoffs, they're nervous that teams are just going to go at him. We've seen Mike Brown lately play because they need secondary ball handling. He's gone to this lineup a lot with Jalen Brunson, Tyler Kolek, and Jordan Clarkson. And there are times where that lineup has looked good. It was really good in the Cup final against San Antonio, and they can create offense. But I don't think there are any sort of delusions within the organization that that lineup is going to work in an intense playoff series against the Boston Celtics second-ranked offense, which is just going to feast on a backcourt of that size and with that sort of defense. Like, you're not going to be able to play those guys together in a playoff series. So I think ultimately the guys who fit a playoff context are going to be the ones who they decide to bring in. And I think they want a backup ball handler, and I think they could use a backup wing. And I don't disagree that they could use another backup big, but I think ultimately it's going to be like the vet who can help them in that sort of context.
Yeah, and we talked about Jose Alvarado before. New Orleans kind of being open for business on some of their players, given the new leadership down there. So I'm sure that that's something that the Knicks and other teams will keep an eye on. Is what would it take to pry Alvarado from New Orleans? But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And I want to hit one more, Fred, before we let you go, from my friend and yours, Jeff Johnson, at Jeff J. Says. He says, salute to the law firm of Begley and Katz, which is funny. That's a good line. He wants to know most realistic transaction Knicks can make to address most pressing needs. So it's kind of what we hit on. But he says, given the aprons and the pots and pans and the personnel that could be available via trade or buyout, the reason I'm interested in this one is because before training camp, Knicks we're talking to some agents about the idea that they wanted to add somebody during the season to have the flexibility financially to add somebody during the season. And you saw them do that with PJ Tucker. And I wonder if they go that path again. And to get there, Fred, they do need to create some space based on where they are now between their team salary and the second apron. And so that's just what interests me in terms of the cap situation and how that could play into what they do. Am I right? Do they need to create a little more room in order to bring in a vet on the buyout market?
Yeah, they do. Right now, they're like $150,000 below the hard cap, so they need to create a little more room. They can get a little creative with Ariel Hukporti, who's not guaranteed right now, and they could like release him and sign him to a 10-day, I think, and then string that out and have some days with 13 on the roster. If they wanted to do that, that could create a little bit of room. And we've seen them do stuff like that with players. Who am I thinking of that they did that with? Who'd they do that with?
Last year, they waited to sign Shamet. They had Matt Ryan.
They waited to shine Shamet. But I'm thinking like 3 years ago, there was somebody who they did that with. I can't remember who it was. I'm getting old, Ian. I'm getting old. I can't remember my 10-day contracts from half a decade ago. What's wrong with me?
That's a bad time, Fred. You better go to the doctor and get yourself checked up, because
I would say I'm losing my mind, but maybe I'm gaining my mind. Maybe not remembering this stuff is good. It means that I'm actually holding on to things that matter more in life. They could also just make a trade that sheds any trade they make will shed salary, because they aren't allowed to take in more money than they give out in any deal, because they're over the first apron. So any trade they make will shed salary, and then we'll see how much they shed. Also remember that when it comes to the point of after the trade deadline and that kind of stuff, when you sign a deal with somebody like a PJ Tucker or someone like that, the salaries are prorated. So it's not like the full season. You don't need to get under there. The other thing you have to remember is that because the Knicks are over the first apron, they're limited in the types of buyout guys that they're actually able to sign. So if somebody is bought out of an expensive contract, the Knicks are actually not allowed to sign that player. They can only sign guys who are coming off of smaller salaries that are below the mid-level exception. So a lot of the bigger buyout guys, if there are bigger buyout guys, and there may not be, I think the in-season buyout market is going to be less robust moving forward than it was in the past because of these restrictions on teams above the first apron. It didn't used to be that way in previous collective bargaining agreements. And because bird rights are now more expensive than they used to be, which is the team that had you, your incumbent team has the right to exceed the salary cap in order to re-sign you for any salary. Players are less willing to give up those bird rights, because re-signing with your team or extending with your current team is now a significantly more important way for you to get paid than it used to be, because the market is not as good as it used to be with this collective bargaining agreement, plus the new buyout rules. I don't think the buyout market is going to present as many like good veterans off of expensive deals as it did in the past, at least not the in-season buyout market. It's different in the summer when, like, you know, Marcus Smart might get released or something.
Right. Fred, you've covered it all, my friend. One last note from producer extraordinaire Sam Candell. She throws some names at me. Were you thinking of Trevor Keels? Were you thinking of Daquan
Trevor
Jeffries?
Keels.
There it is.
Trevor Keels.
There it is.
Great call.
Great call by Sam Candell. Thank you, Sam.
Great call,
thank
Sam.
you, Fred. You are the best. You really gave me a ton of time. I really appreciate it. And I was joking around about doing a 6-hour marathon today. I could easily do it. Your wife wouldn't be happy. My wife wouldn't be happy. So we're not going to do it, but I could talk basketball with you all day. Really appreciate you. Fred Katz, senior NBA writer from The Athletic. Katz and Shoot podcast. Be sure you're subscribed to that. Check out Fred at least once a week with his NBA column. Does a great job. Fred, really, really appreciate your time. That will do it for us here on the Putback. We will be back next week with another Putback episode. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you then.